everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. My name is Brandy and this week we are working on this little piece right here. I'm just giving you a little sneak peek of what it is. It's actually a little side table and this piece is for my aunt, but what's funny about this one is I've had this piece on hand for probably almost 2 years now and I just had a mental block on doing it, and then I got this new transfer from Redesign with Prima, these beautiful magnolia flowers, and it kind of came together in my head for me. So sometimes that happens with pieces if you have a mental block on it and I have to just step away and I can't work on it right then. And until something will hit me and then I need to pull it out. And so sometimes don't question yourself if you're feeling that way in the process, because it doesn't always just flow with the ideas. So that's really normal, but I'm really happy with how this piece came together. My aunt's even happier because she gets her table back. But it's a beautiful color combination, you guys. It's smooth as butter. This transfer is gorgeous against this background, and I think you guys are going to like the process. So let's get started on this one. Before I got this piece, my aunt had already done a lot of the hard work for me in that she had already stripped off the old finish from this one. It had some damage to it, so I needed to use a little bit of wood filler on it. But because this was taken down to the raw wood, I needed to spray this with several coats of shellac to keep it from bleeding through my new paint finish. So that's what I started on this one. I just gave it a quick wipe down to get any dust off, and then I went ahead and sprayed this with probably 2 coats of shellac and 3 coats in some places to make sure it was completely sealed off. Now I'm going to start out by giving this a coat of paint on the base, and I'm thinking that I want to start out with some greens, and it's going to fade into some blues and darker blues on the feet of this piece. So when I paint spindles around the top of this, I paint in sort of a horizontal brush stroke, and I'm almost slapping the spindle to get my way around. And then as I work my way around, I make sure that I've got nice, smooth, even transitions in between my paint colors. I'm using a different brush for each color. These are my Klingon S50 brushes, and of course I'm using them with my Wiesel paint. I did end up changing my final color scheme just a little bit from what you see here, but that's what I do. On this base coat, I'm just conceptualizing my color placement, seeing if I like it, and I felt like I wanted a little more green on this finish in the end. The other change I made to this piece after my base coat was it did have this ring around the inside, and that my aunt ended up telling me was where an inlay had been, but she had to remove it when she was stripping the table down. It came out. And so I decided I wanted to go ahead and fill this with some wood filler. So I put on a coat of wood filler and then sanded this table smooth, and that way that ring is not going to get in the way when I put my transfer on. It also made it a lot easier to paint. So when I was painting the base, I told you guys that I wanted to go a little bit more green on this. And so I'm going to show you that here on the top of this table. I ended up changing the color of my green. And that's because originally I started out with dried thyme, which had some slight blue undertones. I wanted a little bit more yellow in my green, so I chose foxtrot instead. And I'm going to blend it out into the refurbished gentleman, which is that deep blue on the edges of this. Together, foxtrot and refurbished gentleman create this beautiful shade of medium blue. And then in the center, I just put a little ring of restoration, which is a soft beige, and that's what I'm going to create my highlight with. I put this tabletop on one of my wooden stools, and so I'm able to kind of swivel the tabletop around almost like it's on a Lazy Susan, which made it really easy to paint this round blended finish. So I started out in the beginning by laying all of my colors on. So before I can start working these colors together, I need to get them on the table first, and that's exactly what I did. And now I'm going to work my way around the table, and I brush through the center of each color. I want to get rid of those lines of delineation that tell you where one color stops and the next one begins. I want this to look like it's all one color that blends together seamlessly. To do that, I'm using a brush for each color, and I use those to lay my paint colors on, and then I go through each color, and I also use a dry neutral brush, and that's when I want to soften those paint lines and get rid of any delineation. I'll pull out that dry neutral brush. I do have a mister bottle of water, and that's just to keep my paint inactive and moving, so when it starts to set up just a little bit too much, I can add a little tiny bit of water. Now when I mist my paint, I do mist it very lightly. You don't want a whole lot of water on there. It's just enough that I can keep it moving. I kept that spot in the center nice and light. I don't want it to look like it's a totally different color, and I don't want it to look like a light orb that's floating in the middle. I just want it to look like the light is slightly hitting the table a little bit differently. And then I'm going to make sure that I work these colors together and blend them seamlessly. I'm using horizontal and vertical brush strokes, and that gets rid of my brush strokes all facing the same direction, and then it kind of gets lost in the randomness. So this transfer that I'm going to put on this table is called Magnolia Garden, and this is the new maxi size from Redesign with Prima. And this size of transfer fit this table perfectly. For some of these smaller projects, you don't need the huge big transfers, but it was a little too big for the mini ones also. So this was a great size. I ended up picking out this swag, and I'm going to kind of work it in a semicircle shape around the edge of one side of my table. I do a dry fit of my transfer first so that I can kind of get a rough idea where my layout is, and then I always start with the largest piece of my transfer, and I can kind of vine off smaller pieces from there. So with this large swag in its place, and I kind of played around with the placement a little bit to make sure that I didn't lose any flowers around the edge of my table or anything like that. I'm also going to wrap some of the leaves around the edge, and I don't want them wrapping all the way to the bottom, so I did cut those off, but I do want them to wrap just the edge of the table. And I played with all this when I was dry fitting the transfer to make sure that it fit. I wanted to lose as little of my flowers as possible, and so that they were all framed out nicely on the center of the table. I'm going to start by rubbing over the entire transfer using the wooden transfer stick that comes in the package with the transfer. I rub over all of it, and then I'm going to lift up the edge of the clear backing sheet while I rub it at the same time. While I'm rubbing, I'm just watching to make sure that my transfer is staying on my tabletop and not pulling back with my clear transfer sheet. Then I'm going to burnish over the top with my hand, and I'll also burnish with a soft cloth to seat my transfer and get rid of any air bubbles. With my tabletop done, I want to accentuate some of the turnings that are on this base, and I'm going to do that using Redesign with Prima decor wax, and this color gold is called Eternal. It's sort of a nice antique gold. Next, I sprayed this with 2 coats of Wise Owl satin varnish, and this tabletop is complete. What do you think? It's absolutely beautiful, you guys. It's a really nice update for such a pretty little piece. Very nice and feminine. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. You can find links for everything I use in the description for this post. As always, you can find more Brushed by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube, and on my website at brushedbybrandy.com. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please click that subscribe button for a weekly tutorial on Brushed by Brandy on YouTube.